Now, I want to come back to the press secretary because the most ridiculous thing that this woman said is that we don't need a study to tackle systemic racism, but we need a study for reparations. Outside of the fact that, once again, she's not making any logical sense, that there are numerous studies on systemic racism, but not on reparations. And at this point in time, this is probably one of the greatest lies being told. Research studies on reparations have been occurring for decades now. As recent as 2 weeks ago, Harvard Medical School found in their research/study that reparations could have reduced the number of deaths and transmissions that occurred as the result of our current global health crisis that we're dealing with. Joe Biden's relationship with Black America over the course of his 40-plus year career has been a very anti-relationship, to say the very least. Now, for starters, as we all know, Biden is the architect of mass incarceration. You cannot say mass incarceration in this country without saying Joe Biden, who is the author, if not the co-author, of every major crime bill, which was strategically designed to disproportionately imprison Black males. This is something that he was actually very proud of, by the way.
I hope this crime bill, when it passes, the Biden-Hatch crime bill, as it becomes law, God willing, I hope that we will have ended, once and for all, this notion that is a hangover from the 60s, that somehow Democrats are weak on crime and Democratic presidents are weak on crime and Republicans are tough on crime. The truth is, every major crime bill since 1976 that's come out of this Congress, every minor crime bill has had the name of the Democratic senator from the state of Delaware, Joe Biden, on that bill.
He was so proud of his accomplishments concerning mass incarceration that he even bragged that his bills were so tough that they did everything but hang these brothers, which is a federal crime, by the way, but that's neither here nor there.
Let me tell you what is in the bill, and I'll let you all decide whether or not this is weak. Let me get down here a compendium of the things that are in the bill. One, the death penalty. It provides 53 death penalty offenses. Weak as can be, you know? We do everything but hang people for jaywalking in this bill. That's weak stuff.
And of course, he also opposed the integration of schools and the busing of Black children into white neighborhoods. But the one thing that Joe Biden has been vehemently against since 1975 is the idea of reparations for the descendants of American slavery. And this is the statement that he actually made about it back in 1975. I don't feel responsible for the sins of my father and grandfather. I feel responsible for what the situation is today, for the sins of my own generation. And I'll be damned if I feel responsible to pay for what happened 300 years ago. Now, I would normally unpack a BS statement like this, but for me to do so would add an additional 10 minutes to this video. Plus, I spoke on this about 6 months ago in a video titled, Joe Biden Dismisses Reparations Again, So Why Are Black Americans Voting for Him? I'll leave the link to that video pinned in the comment section below for those of you who'd like to watch it. But with all that being said, let's now fast forward to the present day. While Joe Biden was running for president, anytime reparations was brought up, he would entertain the question but would always make it a point to undermine it by making a ridiculous statement like he did while he was being interviewed by Ed Gordon when he said that he supported reparations if it included Native Americans in it. Or during the Democratic national debate, when he was asked about reparations and he literally told the descendants of American slavery that he was going to give your reparations to Hispanics. So it's of no surprise that once he got into office, his dismissal and evasion of reparations would continue. Now, last week during a press meeting, when Joe Biden's press secretary was being asked about whether Biden would sign the Reparations Study Bill known as HR40 once it came to his desk, she responded with good old faithful benign neglect.
The president during the campaign supported the study for reparations, the committee to study reparations. There was a House Judiciary Committee hearing today. Does the president support the legislation? He stopped short of saying that during the campaign. Would he sign that if it came to his desk?
Well, he's supported a study of reparations, which I believe is what's being discussed, and studying the continuing impacts of slavery, which is being discussed in this hearing on HR40, I believe it is. And he continues to demonstrate his commitment to take comprehensive action to address the systemic racism that persists today. Obviously, that is having that study is a part of that, but he has signed an executive order on his first day, which would begin to deliver on his commitment to having an across government approach to addressing racial inequality and making sure equity is a part of his entire policy agenda. But he certainly would support a study of reparations. We understands that we don't need a study to take action right now on systemic racism, so he wants to take actions within his own government in the meantime.
Would he support the bill? Because you're talking about the study, but if the bill came to his desk, would he sign it?
Well, it's working its way through Congress. He'd certainly support a study, but we'll see what happens through the legislative process.
Just last question on that. The president has signed quite a few executive actions. Why not on this issue create a commission and by executive order?
He actually signed a number of actions on racial equity on his first day or his first couple of days in office because he felt it was essential to send the message to the American people and the world that having an across-government approach, ensuring that equity is a central part of his policy agenda, was, not just a singular issue, but something that would be a part of every policy issue he approaches, whether it's healthcare, whether it's economic inequality, a range of issues. That's his approach and how he's trying to, address the root causes of racism in our country today.
But he doesn't support a reparations executive order. He won't sign it.
Again, it would be up to him. He has executive order authority. He would certainly support a study, and we'll see where Congress moves on that issue. Go ahead.
Just again, you're getting a lot of follow-ups from last night.
None of what this woman said made any logical sense. If Biden supports the study, then why can't he commit to signing the bill if it passes? Furthermore, if Biden supports the study as much as she says he does, then why won't he sign an executive order to put the commission together himself? He has signed executive orders for every other group and racial demographic on day one. And this is despite the fact that it's the black vote that put him into office. And he was so thankful of this that he even went out of his way to say this.
Meaning, especially for those moments, and especially for those moments when this campaign was at its lowest ebb, the African-American community stood up again for me. You've always had my back, and I'll have yours.
Now when it's time to have your back, he's giving you the runaround. Now, I want to come back to the press secretary because the most ridiculous thing that this woman said is that we don't need a study to tackle systemic racism, but we need a study for reparations. Outside of the fact that, once again, she's not making any logical sense, that there are numerous studies on systemic racism, but not on reparations. And at this point in time, this is probably one of the greatest lies being told. Research studies on reparations have been occurring for decades now. As recent as 2 weeks ago, Harvard Medical School found in their research/study that reparations could have reduced the number of deaths and transmissions that occurred as the result of our current global health crisis that we're dealing with. Blank is disproportionately sickening and killing Black Americans, the result of centuries of structural racism, a group of Harvard researchers says. If the U.S. had paid reparations to the descendants of Black Americans who were enslaved, though, the risk of severe illness and death from the blank would be far lower, according to the new peer-reviewed study by the researchers. The group of researchers from Harvard Medical School and the Layson Commission on Reparations and Redistributive Justice examined how reparation payments made before the blank would have affected Louisiana, a state that remains segregated in parts, and found that the payments could have reduced blank transmission in the state anywhere between 31 to 68%. The researchers' latest findings highlight the importance of the blank strategy that considers the racial gap of blank exposures and transmission, the researchers said. The effects of racial justice interventions on Black and white health disparities are rarely investigated, which forms part of how systemic racism has reproduced. Study author Dr. Eugene Richardson, an assistant professor of global health and social medicine at Harvard Medical School, told CNN in an email. Our study simply gives yet another example of how racism gets into people's bodies and makes them sick, which can be added by the litany of evidence for reparations. And just in case you're wondering what the study author looks like, Dr. Eugene Richardson, this is him right here, because I know for some people it matters that he looks like this because him looking like this equals validation to the statements that's being made. Now, please understand that the purpose of dangling this study over your head is simply a stalling tactic. Really let this sit on your mind for a second. For as flawed as HR40 is, they don't even want to pass a broken bill in fear of a collective black uplift. So the name of the game is simply waste time until the conversation doesn't make sense anymore. And in my personal opinion, come 2030, this conversation is over because you really have to take a look at the landscape of America at that time. Really think about this, okay? At this moment in time, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is 87 years old. Jesse Jackson is around 77 years old. Dr. Claude Anderson is in his 80s. Harry Belafonte is somewhere in his 80s. What's my point of bringing these men up? All of these men are survivors of Jim Crow. By 2030, all of the survivors of Jim Crow will have passed on. And by that time, obviously all of your direct connections to slavery are gone, but you will also have lost all of your direct connections to the survivors of Jim Crow. Furthermore, you will be living in a country where the dominant society's population is dropping. Meanwhile, the population of so-called people of color are rising, which is displacing you into fourth place on the population list. At that moment in time, you have to ask yourself, what are we talking about? Not because the conversation is not valid, but because the demographics of the United States have shifted so much that the conversation no longer makes sense. And that's not because that's how I personally feel, but once again, with such a drastic shift in the demographics in this country, if you're having a hard time now to get people to sign off on reparations, I can't even begin to imagine how much more difficult it will be come 2030 and beyond. So please don't get me misunderstood. I'm just trying to emphasize that the time is now. And if you keep letting these people run game on you, they will continue to dangle that carrot over your head for the simple purposes of wasting time. Because as early as 3 days ago, Biden's press secretary was asked the same question again, and she gave the same BS benign neglect answer.
The first is, you stopped short of saying that President Biden would sign HR40, the bill to study reparations. I just wonder, now that it's been a few days after the hearing, whether or not there's any update on that, given that the president has said that he would back a study on reparations.
So you certainly would back a study. I don't think anything's changed, though, from what I conveyed a couple of days ago.
He stopped short of saying he would sign the bill.
I said he would support a study, and he certainly would. And we'll take a look if there's legislation that is passed by Congress.
Now, with all of this being said, let us act with a sense of urgency when it comes to attaining reparations, as well as a comprehensive Black agenda, alongside with doing the things that are necessary in our personal lives to make sure that we advance forward. And with all that being said, that does it for today's video. So please make sure you hit that subscribe button, as well as the bell notification next to the subscribe button so you can be notified whenever I release a new video. All social media links will be pinned in the comment section below. Also, don't forget to text tdhiphop to number 33222. That's tdhiphop to number 33222. That way you'll get a direct text notification whenever I release a new video, but it also serves as a protection plan for myself in case YouTube ever gives this channel the axe. I will be able to send you a direct link to where you can find me next. And last but certainly not least, for those of you who have been subscribed to this channel for quite some time now and have a love and appreciation for the work that I put in on this channel, the number one way you can show your support to me is through Patreon. For only $3 a month, that will help put me in position to be able to take TD Hip Hop Media off of YouTube. Remember, the goal is not to grow big on YouTube, but to grow independent of YouTube. And until the next video, peace.